Warning, this video contains forced memes, Top Gun references, American patriotism, and a guest writer. Sorry. The M3 Stuart was designed and built in 1939, when FDR decided he wanted to equip his wheelchair with a 37mm spitball launcher. The Stuart is a descendant in the undistinguished M1 combat car and M2 tank lineage, making it the R&D equivalent of a flower growing out of a turd. Because the US had no idea what the hell it was doing with its first tank designs, it decided to follow its aircraft design philosophy of LOL, who needs cannons anyway. Instead, the US welded a bunch of 30 cal machine guns all over the hull, and stuck another 30 cal on top of the turret, like it was a birthday cake topper made for John fucking Browning. The tank first saw use by the British in North Africa, where it actually was an even match for then current German armor. However, it quickly became outdated, because its armor has fewer slopes than the Russian Winter Olympics. The M3 also served with US Marines in the Pacific Theater, successfully teabagging inferior Japanese armor, because it was a light tank that could actually fight in the jungle. The Russians were also sent several Stuarts. They deemed the tank inferior, with an underpowered gun, unacceptably narrow treads, and eggshell-thin armor, giving history its first hints of Russian bias. Despite this, it's actually a decent tank, and one of the first that new players encounter. Its purpose in War Thunder is to fool new players into thinking they might actually have fun playing with American tanks. The Stuart will allow you to fulfill your need.
The need for speed. Ow!
Speed is life, and you will be too fast to live, too young to die. This is because the United States, still apparently stuck on its aircraft design style philosophy, decided to power the thing with a radial engine. This part's commonality likely explains American teams' utter inability to side climb in RB aircraft matches, because they still think they are in tanks or something. In order to unleash your inner NASCAR, you must first change your control settings, briefly select realistic tank controls, and then assign your cruise controls to whatever you prefer. This will save you from carpal tunnel syndrome, but it will also eliminate your last source of exercise, thereby contributing to America's horrid obesity rate, you fat bastard. Since you are the land version of Michael Phelps, at the beginning of a match, point yourself in the direction you wish to go, then shift into the second cruise control gear. This activates the warp drive. Prepare to leave everyone else in the dust as you expand your manifest destiny to the cap point. Be careful though, if you hit a bump, you're going to get more sweet air than Tony Hawk with a Game Shark. In fact, since Gaijin borrowed the M3's physics model from Mass Effect's Mako, there are few limits to the tank's performance. The vehicle's only downsides are that its reverse gear is slower to change course than the Johnson administration's strategy in Vietnam. In fact, it's quicker to turn around and go forward than it is going backwards from a stopped position. If the M18 is a rally car with a cannon, and the M10 is a rusted out John Deere tractor with a cannon, the M3 is a go-kart with a hot dog launcher, your main method of warfare will be to utilize the M3's ludicrous speed to reach the nearest cap point or the highest ground. Avoid open ground if you can. The M3 is at its best when skirting and dipping into the edges of cities, playing whack-a-mole from the high ground, or zipping about in uneven terrain, so it can bushwhack its foes. If you are caught out in the open, never drive in one direction for too long. Instead, if you are intending to close the distance between you and the freedom-hating son of a bitch shooting at you, zigzag in a roughly 90-degree arc while facing your opponent. By changing the angle of your approach by just a few degrees, you make it much more difficult for the fascist shooting at you to hit anything. If all that sounds too complicated, just remember two simple words.
Serpentine!
Once you have gotten as close to your quarry as the Redcoats did to the Patriots at Bunker Hill, it's time to unleash the Stuart's special ability, the Power Slide. The Power Slide means that, once you've built up sufficient speed, you can drift past your foe and place yourself in a location where he simply can't shoot you. He'll have to hit you during the slide if he hopes to stop you. If you're moving fast enough, his turret traverse won't be able to match your speed. Pop him in the turret to ensure he can't retaliate, then wipe him out. Artillery is your smokescreen. While artillery is mainly an annoyance, it is extremely useful for M3 drivers. In arcade, it'll charge after each kill, up to 3 times. Treat it like a kill streak in Call of Duty, and save it for the opportune moment. Alternatively, spam it at first opportunity for maximum havoc, or coordinate it with your fellow patriots to drop concentrated fire on commie bastards, so they can all partake equally in the ass kicking, the redistributive punks. The point of artillery in War Thunder is not to try to kill your opponent or even necessarily to damage them. It's to blind them.
Give it!
Pocket sand.
Ideally, wait until you have to deal with opponents in urban combat, or who are entrenched behind a hill or a capture point, then drop all of your artillery right on top of their heads. This will blind your opponents, much as the glory of the Declaration of Independence blinded King George, so you can flank them and shank them in their ribs. While the point of artillery may not be to destroy your foes, it's still quite possible to do so. However, you'll need to pour a sufficient amount of crew skill points into the 2 artillery skills, accuracy and calling time. This can be surprisingly cheap, even at the high end. They only cost a little more than 100 points per level. Despite being a mere BR 1.3 tank, the Stuart is surprisingly survivable. You actually can bounce shots if you're properly angled and positioned far enough away from your enemies, which is a cruel joke for every American tanker who thinks they'll be able to continue doing anything like that up until they manage to get the 75 Jumbo Sherman, a tank that is terrible in all other aspects. The Stuart is, believe it or not, more durable at its 1.3 BR than the M26 is at its 6.3 BR. In fact, it has more armor than the M18, although that is like saying a wet paper towel has more structural integrity than a tumbler user's fragile mental state. The 4 crew members, plus the crew restoration module, mean that you essentially have 5 crew to venture into battle with. Plus, the removal of last man standing served as an indirect buff, since an enemy must simultaneously knock out all 4 of your crew, while most enemies at this tier have 2 or 3. Even the interior of the tank, which is as spacious as a water-damaged loft apartment in New York City, is not too much of a drawback at the Stuart's tier. If possible, try to use the crew restoration module as soon as you lose a single crew member. This will allow you to function at full force for longer. The general lack of high explosive filler in most tier 1 shells, combined with the Stuart's ammo racks being placed in the center of the tank behind the driver and assistant driver, mean that you will almost never get ammo racked from the front. If you get shot from the side and get ammo racked, it's your own damn fault. You must flank harder, lest you be flanked. When you do take a critical hit, it will usually be one of the drivers, or either the gunner or loader. If it's one of the latter 2, retreat until they can be replaced. If you are too close to the enemy to run away, close the distance and do donuts around them like a deranged NASCAR driver until a crew member is able to arrange himself amongst his comrades' body parts and take control of the cannon.
How you doing?
The gun is, surprisingly, more than adequate. It can penetrate anything frontally at its tier, though it will be prone to occasionally bouncing if you use the standard armor-piercing ammunition. Even then, regular AP shot, though horrid at any other tier, is useful here. Enemy vehicles will often only have 3 crew members, all of whom will be tightly packed into their soon-to-be flaming coffins. The shrapnel from the AP will shred them with the greatest of ease. And even if your first shot bounces, don't panic. Your cannon reloads faster than American industry could churn out a heavy bomber. When fully aced, you will be able to get off a round in a hair under 4 seconds. If you get tracked, or lose your engine or transmission, fear not, you've merely unlocked War Thunder's tower defense minigame. Your crew and armor will allow you to stay in the game for a surprisingly long time, until you wipe out the wave of opponents near you. To exit the minigame, repair and drive off. Even if you don't one-shot your enemy, watch the damage video in the corner. Pay attention to which crew members have been killed, then shoot anyone who's left. The vast majority of enemy vehicles you face can be eliminated from the side with a cannon round to the turret, then a cannon round to the driver's compartment, giving you a better 1-2 punch than the first and second amendments. The standard M3 is also equipped with more small arms than a National Rifle Association sponsored gun show. You have a total of 4 30 caliber machine guns, along with one more 30 cal located on top of the turret. They aren't useful for much, but if you find yourself facing off against an open-topped AA vehicle and can bring all of your guns to bear, you can finally make those bastards pay for their higher tier shenanigans by repeatedly plinking them in the face until they explode. Not so fucking funny now, is it? The M3 lineage is actually missing one of its later variants, the M3A3, which would have included such niceties as welded armor with a 20-degree slope and a roomier interior, all because the US can't have nice things. However, you do have access to the M3A1, which comes with a vertical gun stabilizer, a fuel tank that's located in the floor and therefore nearly impossible to damage, and the removal of those stupid shoulder-mounted machine guns. There's also a ready rack in the turret, and the lack of a tumor on top of the turret, the latter of which slightly improves survivability. You also have access to the premium M3A1 USMC, and I hope you're ready to be showered in a comparatively large amount of silver lions and research points, because this tank ran out of fucks to give somewhere between the halls of Montezuma and the shores of Tripoli. While nothing really differentiates it from the standard M3A1, this macro machine does get a sweet, unique camouflage that is perfect for jungle maps and absolutely no other location. Plus, it's a tank manned by US Marines. Semper Fi, motherfucker. Of course, the only thing that can be more entertaining than zipping around a map in your own personal Hot Wheels car is zipping around a map with 3 of your friends in your personal Hot Wheels cars while recreating your own Desert Storm, hosing down scrubs with the combined power of 4 hot dog launchers. When it comes to team tactics, think of yourself like a swarm of rabid bees. Sweep around the edge of the map to take a cap zone. Continue working as your own detachment away from the main tank forces and win matches entirely by yourselves. It's also a requirement that at least half your squad have microphones for voice communication over TeamSpeak. Attempting to coordinate what amounts to the land equivalent of a squadron of A-wings is practically impossible at the speed of text. Try to work in teams of 2 while still moving together as a unit of 4. This may sound difficult, but it will allow each of you to cover your partner, make your callouts, and keep up a constant stream of communication. Don't try to camp one position too long. While it may seem tempting to set up an ambush somewhere with your friends, this will probably end poorly for you. Everything at this tier is so goddamn sanic you're likely to get ambushed instead, especially if they get the drop on you. Remember, your main asset is your speed and maneuverability. Use it like the transcontinental railroad and cross the map along flanking routes. If you attempt to camp, you remove the speed, and thus your main weapon. The same basic tactics apply to all 3 modes. Keep in mind that in RB and Sim it will be easier to hit you from long range because of the lower speed, so staying out of the open is especially important. Honestly, given the relative skill level of players at the Stuart's BR, you should SEAL Club more than an Inuit hunting party, unless the entirety of the enemy team is just that good, or your team is as competent as most American pilots in RB. You should win more often than not. The M3's absurd speed, combined with decent squad tactics mean that you will score knockouts more quickly than Mike Tyson in his prime. After your inevitable victory, display your Tyson-like lack of sportsmanship by doing donuts in your opponent's spawn point.
Showing utter disdain for his opponent's abilities, Tatum is taking a short mid-round breather to converse with actor Charlie Sheen.
You know what's great there is the sea bass. They do it blackened or sauteed. It's stupendous.
You can also up-tier yourself purposefully to get War Thunder's version of a knife kill in an FPS, the execution by low tier. And even though the Stuart may be one of the meanest low tier tanks, it does have some stiff competition. The Panzer 4th C&D deserves special mention as they are the only other tank you'll commonly see which is capable of one-shotting you in a consistent manner. Prioritize them, because their shells actually are capable of killing everything inside the Stuart's tiny interior. Flak Panzers are arguably the most dangerous enemy you'll face, and a preview of what you can expect to deal with in higher tiers. They pose the same dangers that German light tanks do, but are arguably more difficult to kill since they are smaller, and it can be difficult to use a shell to end their pathetic existence. Again, attempt to disable their weapons, then flank around them and blast them. Bathe them in machine gun fire as needed. If you play arcade, you will encounter American and British tanks on the enemy team. The Crusader Mark II is arguably the biggest threat you face aside from the Panzer IVe, as it has a stupendous 5 crew and a powerful gun. It also has a turret that is as bouncy as hell, equipped as they are with the shielding device located on the forest moon of Ender. It looks like it was built from discarded polygons left over from rendering the F-117 Nighthawk. Avoid attempting to engage it frontally unless you're sure you can nail the flat front of the turret, a difficult task given how small that is. LVTs are trolling ink on it. They do not have good armor. Their gun, like American 4th graders' international test scores, is merely average. It's slow. So what makes it so dangerous to you? Simple, the stupidly large size and its entire goddamn battalion of a crew mean it's all but impossible to one-shot them. You'll have to continue pumping rounds into it, paying attention to the damage camera. You'll have to snipe the crew individually. When you finally do kill it, feel gratified knowing that you're a better whale hunter than Captain Ahab.
Hey, you're just mad because I'll be able to do something with my fucking guitar in hands that you'll never be able to achieve in your entire life, kid. So yeah, you're gay.
Hopefully this guide has been helpful. If you haven't gotten the Zika virus from the dank memes yet, congratulations. Now, go take the Rainbow Road through the danger zone and show them how the power wheels of justice work. And while you're at it, go watch something actually funny, unlike the piece of shit you just watched.